introduction, um, I think it's right time we actually get started into object-oriented programming. I already laid the foundations for some basics on. In fact, what we are going to be doing right now is just getting through things because I had already introduced them, right? So we dealt with the introductions, and right now we are going to be moving into PHP classes and objects. That's in object-oriented programming, right? Now, just like we had already mentioned, classes and objects are two main aspects of object-oriented programming. I mean, just as the name states, you hear object, meaning that we are creating objects. So our programming is inclined towards objects, right? Now, I want you to actually look at this diagram that we have here. So we have a class called fruits and some attributes called some object called banana, apple, pineapple, and strawberry. These are all some kind of fruit, right? So a class, like we said, is a template or a blueprint for creating an object. I think we made mention of that. So it defines like the structure, right, or a template through which we can come up with something. That is the simplest I can put, even though there are simple ways to understand that. Now, an object is simply an instance of the class, right? Just like you have the class called fruit or a fruit, which is like a blueprint or a template. You now have banana, which is an instance. Now, that instance is called an object, right? Now, when the individual objects are created, they inherit all the properties and behaviors from the class, but each object would have different values from the properties, right? Now, I also want you to look at this other diagram, which is the person class. Now, it has attributes. These attributes are likened to the variables, and you have the functionalities which are likened to the functions, right? Now, we'll get into some other details of that later, but I want you to note something. Now, you have the person class having maybe attributes like name, age, gender, occupation, and you have the functionality, right? Like work, talk, eat, sleep, and work, right? All of these you call them um, the methods or the functionalities, which we are still going to get into. Now, let us look at the example that we have from here, right? Now, I want us to see how to define a class, right? Now, a class is identified or defined using the class keyword which you have there. If you want to define a class in PHP, use the class keyword, then followed by the class name, then followed by the curly braces. This is an example of what you have here. You have the class, then the name, then open curly braces, and then everything that goes into the class goes here. Now, you should note that in your OOP, variables are called properties and functions are called methods. This is just to clarify. Now, I'm trying to link our procedural programming that we did before to object-oriented programming. When we talk of variables in procedural programming, when we come to object-oriented programming, we liken those variables to properties. And when we talk of functions, we liken those functions to methods in object-oriented programming. Now, let's talk about properties and methods, right? Now, you have what we have declared here. We talk of the uh, properties as the attributes of a particular class, what the class has, right? Um, when I say what I have, for example, I have a name, I have an age, and so on. And we also talk of methods, which deals with what I can do, right? It has to do with maybe the aspect of walking, the aspect of maybe talking, and so on. So properties and methods are simply the attributes and the functionalities respectively of a particular class, right? Now, you can when you define a class, you like we have here, you have a class, and this class has a class name, then followed by curly brace, then you have the properties, which are the attributes of that class, and you have the methods, which are the functionalities that that class can have, right? Now, when you have had this is where we start talking of object-oriented programming, because we can now create objects or instances from this fruit class, and that is what we have here. Now, classes are nothing without object. We can create multiple objects from a class, and each of these objects are going to have properties and methods that may be different, right? That is when I say the properties and methods that may be different. I mean the properties or the values of the property. For example, a fruit, a particular fruit may be called an apple, and another fruit may be called a banana, right? So these are all uh, objects having different data for particular properties and methods. Now, we have an example here, and I want us to talk about something before actually switching to my code editor. You have this keyword, this particular keyword that you have here is very useful when defining objects. Now, also the new keyword is used to define object. Sorry, I did not mention that. When you want to define an object, you use the new keyword, and when you use the new, you then pass in the object name and so on. The example here best explains it. So you have a class called fruit with the properties and the method. Then out of that class, you define an object of that class called orange, right? And orange is an instance of the fruit class. Now, since you are calling an object, you use a new keyword to say, okay, the orange is a new type of fruit. Banana is another new type of fruit. Now, we are going to get into this when I actually switch to my editor, and I think I should do that, right? So back here in my editor, we say a class, for example, is defined using the class keyword. Let me increase. A class is defined using the class keyword followed by the class name. So my class name is fruit, and then I open these curly braces and my code goes in here. Let's actually get to a class that has some properties and methods in it. So I have this next folder, or this next file, sorry. Now this file has a class by name fruit with two properties, the fruit name and the color, right? I also defined two properties which are functions. A property that is used to set the name of a particular fruit, and another property that is used to get the name, right? Now, the property set name sets the name that we pass inside this uh, parameter here, inside this function, right? I'll call it a function even though it's called a method. I set this name to the name that is given here. Please take note, this name and this name are not the same. So I could say, uh, let's see, given name, and then I'll say this dot given name is equal to name. Sorry, this dot name, for example, this dot name is equal to given name, right? Now, I just wanted to make sure that you understand that this argument that is passed into this function is not what is here, right? That is why I did this. So this is a property that is used to set the name of a fruit, and this is another property that is used to get the name of a fruit. Now, this is coming back to functions. You discover that some functions, when we're defining functions, they had a return keyword. So what this function simply does, it just returns this class's name, so that when we define an object for this class, right, we'll be able to get the name. Now let's get to actually do something. So now I am defining my object. So let me comment it, define a new object, right? So I give an object, I could set the name to apple, for example, and I say it's a new fruit. So now I have a new instance of the fruit class which I can work with. Now the next thing is this: since I have my apple, I want to set the name, right? So I will say, sorry. So I will call my apple instance, then the arrow keyword is used. Just like in Python, you use the dot, for example, maybe apple dot. But in PHP, you use the arrow keyword to actually get properties and methods for a particular class. So I will say maybe I want to set the name, set uh, name. That's the function I declared, and I'm going to pass in the name. Say let's say apple, like we said, apple, and we are also going to get the name. So I have set the name called apple, and I want to get the name, right? So just a recap: I defined my class, I set in the two properties, the name and the color, and I also set in two methods that this class can use, maybe to set the name and to get the name. You could also define, say, another method function, set color, for example, and now passing the given color. This function is going to use this keyword, and then color is equal to the given color, right? And I'm also going to define another method to get it. So function get color, and I return the color. Good. So I have these two functions, and I've defined an instance apple. So this instance has set set name. I also set the color apple, set color, as a color. What's the color of an apple again? I don't know. I'll set green. Now these are two methods that I have called for this instance, and I want to echo out this. So let me actually say the fruit, pass the fruit name, pass color, then I pass in the uh sorry, this will be called apple. Apple get color. I just to this will be called apple, right? So we have a full class with an object called apple. We've set the color, the name and the color, and then we want to echo out the name and the color using the getters that we have set as properties or as methods, sorry, as methods inside of here. So if we happen to execute this too, Let me clear the screen and rerun the code. So you see the fruit apple has color green. Just to format this a little bit, the fruit called, called apple has color green. You see. Uh, so you actually get to see this here. Now we have been able to define a class in PHP. We have been able to create an instance of that class, and we've been able to use some properties and methods to actually do some work on the class. Hopefully this was clear enough. This is basically how you are going to use classes in PHP, right? I hope this was understood. If you have any questions, feel free to actually post your questions maybe on this channel or on Slack or wherever, maybe on the announcement on your dashboard. Just feel free to post your questions, and uh, you actually get answers to that. For now, this is basically what we wanted to learn: what how to define classes, how to define properties, how to define methods, and how to create instances of that class. Yeah, see you in the next tutorial.